This is a 2003 Subaru WRX 5-speed manual, and we're gonna fix the shifter slop and install a short shifter. So here's what it's like right now. It's really loose. I already pulled the trim, but you can see like the whole thing is just not finding gear at all. So what you wanna do is you pull up this piece of trim first, have the e-brake up all the way, and then you can pop this one out. Your shift knob should untwist. Mine's kind of stuck, so I'm gonna work with it like this. And what we're looking at is this bushing in here. This one goes bad. Let me wiggle it. And then also, what we're gonna be doing obviously is replacing this shifter. And then there's 3 bushings down below and a U-joint down below. So there's a couple things you gotta do underneath the car. Start off, let's take this off, grab a 12 mil and take this bolt out. All right, don't lose this bolt. Actually, it's a pretty normal bolt. You can lose it if you want. And you should be able to pull this out. All right, pulling that shifter out is not easy. It's a snap fit, so I used a pry bar and actually 2 pry bars. One to push down this plastic ring and one to pull up on this point right here to separate the two. But now it's separated. I'm sure you can get a replacement piece for that if there's a different style, but that should do for us. I'm gonna clean it out really good and leave it like this so I can go underneath and work a little bit easier with this being disconnected. You can also unscrew these 4 bolts and it should drop this whole mechanism and boot thing, which I might do to clean it up better. Now that we're under the car, let's take a look at what we're gonna be replacing and taking off. First thing is this U-joint right up top. That is this. It is a bolt through this part and then a lock screw in that. Next one is this lower rod. There's bushings up in there. And that'll be this black section, and this one's also part of the same kit, which goes right up there. And then there's a few bushings. Oh, actually, that's for this part. So yeah, just this kit right here. It's recommended that you do take off this cross member support just so it's easier to access, but I'm gonna be doing it without taking it off because it's not really necessary. And I'll just end up taking out this whole linkage system up, push it up through so I can clean it up, get it prepped. On the lower rod, that is just a 12 mil nut and then it slides off. There's a retainer plate right there that comes off first, and you get better access up to the bolt above it for the shift fork selector. All right, slight change of plans. The bolt on the U-joint was real hard, so I'm gonna wait until I slide the whole thing off. First thing I did is take these bolts off for the back bushing, and now this whole assembly is pretty loose. And now up here, it's not a screw holding that collar on, it is a press pin. So you're gonna have to get some punches and hammer out, there's 2 of them, there's one inside the other. I started hammering out the one on the inside, and then I'll hammer out the one surrounding it. All right, those are the 2 pins. The smaller one goes inside this bigger one. Once you knock those out, not too hard actually, then you end up with that U-joint collar. It'll slide right off. So what I did was I pulled all the mechanism forward and pushed the boot up through the floor and took off the pivot bushing right here. Slid right off that end of that shaft, which let it fit up in there. And now I can push the whole thing while pushing that collar off. Push the whole thing up and out through the hole. All right, so this is where I'm at. This assembly should pull straight through. And I've got U-joint and bushings I had to replace right there. And I can clean this whole thing up. So I'm gonna get that clean and I'll be right back. All right, now that I got this fairly cleaned up, I'm gonna be doing a couple things. I'm gonna throw this piece in the vise so I can take this bolt out and put the new U-joint in. I'm gonna use a flathead or a little pry bar thing to peel out these old bushings so I can put the new ones in. And then I'm just gonna clean out this socket in here And everything's gonna get lubed up. I'll show you as I do it, but there's a good amount of silicone synthetic grease we'll be putting everywhere. All right, getting that old one out and the new one in isn't too tough. I put the thing in the vise and took this bolt out. You gotta use a dowel to punch it through. And then the new one, if it doesn't fit, if it doesn't slide in, I used 2 screwdrivers, 1 through each hole, kind of like that, and pried these ears apart just enough to get this to slide in, and then send that bolt back through and hammer it in with silicone. I'm using Silglide. It's good for rubber assemblies. So get that all gooped up in there, and then you can tighten it down, and then we're gonna work on this piece. This bushing was a little bit more tough. I ended up using a flathead and pushing it all the way in and ripping one side off in order to push this side through. But now we can get this one in. And we're gonna be putting Silglide around the outside and the inside of this. Now I got all the bushings in with the grease. I cleaned out the pivot cup and greased that up really good with silicone. And instead of putting the press pin back in to here, I'm deciding to use a 1/2-inch bolt. It's a 1/2-inch head with a long shoulder on it, about an inch long shoulder. That fits perfectly in replacement of that, and it's a lot easier to deal with, so that's going in instead. So let's go ahead and feed this in back through the top and start connecting everything back together. Once you feed it through, connect that top fork selector first, and then make sure this stabilizer bar is through above the cross brace, and then you can pull this through and push this bushing onto the stabilizer bar. This is not easy to do, but make sure it's all greased up, and then put it into place. You can bolt that in and then slide this on to the shaft and bolt that in. Don't forget the retaining washer. All right, with it all installed, this is what it should look like. And now let's move up to the top side for the shifter. All right, now we're working up here with the new shifter. I went ahead and installed this metal retainer, now holding the boot back in place. So all we gotta do here is shove this into that hole. It's not gonna be too easy. So I'm gonna get my hand off of this, but then we're gonna move on to installing the this piece. All right, this part was definitely the hardest part to get in, without a doubt. I ended up using Buddy's hand to hold it steady, put this heavy block on top, and I smacked it once really hard with a 5-pound hammer, and it popped right into place. Even when it was us with both of our body weight on it, it was not going in, so it just needs that impact force. But I also put a metal wedge in between the bottom of that and the drive shaft just to give it a little bit more support so it doesn't bounce back. So good luck with that part, but let's go hooking this up now. All right, before we do anything, I took this off with the little retainer screws. I'm gonna use blue Loctite on them and tighten them down. There's 2 dimples on the back that they match up with, and that'll be your set screws. And then we can hook up the, actually, we're gonna put that cylinder in first before we hook anything up. So slide a cylinder in and use white lithium grease in the bearing. You could also use bearing grease, but this is pretty much all you need. And then we'll go from there. All right, I had to put that nylon spacer with the pin. We're using the short pin on this one in the vise to press the pin into that nylon spacer. You only need that one. So now I'm gonna send that bolt through and hook our all up. Finally, I'm gonna use a little bit of blue Loctite on that thread and tighten it up, and we'll see what that slop looks like now. All right, take a look at this fully installed. It does not need to be tightened too much. So if you tighten it all the way, it might be hard to push forward and back, but loosen it up a little bit just so it's not so tight on the forward and back movement. Just be sure to grease up the side pieces. But let's look at that. There's a little bit of slop, nothing like it was before. It doesn't twist at all, which is really nice. But that's neutral all the way over. And then we got first, second. So I can actually get to first gear now. I couldn't do that before. and 5th. It's very, there's a little bit of play still. I think that's coming down from below. So I might go look at that, but overall, huge improvement. Feels just about like stock. All right, so slop I was feeling is actually in the gearbox itself. It's probably just from a used transmission, pretty old, but there's a ball retainer in there that probably has worn spots for them to sit in. So without rebuilding that transmission, that's as perfect as I can get it. I'm sure that if you do this on a pretty good transmission, it'll come out real stiff and nice. So we'll throw the boot back on in the knob. Let's see what it looks like. All right, before I throw this on, I ended up getting a replacement shift knob. If you're doing this, there's just a plastic collar on the back once you take it off, and you just get some pliers and peel it. And then you should be able to pull the shift knob off the boot. This one was pretty worn. Surprisingly hard to find leather shift knobs on Amazon, but this is what I got as a replacement. There's a thread insert that should match. I'm gonna double check, figure out how this all goes together, and I'll show you what I do. I'm not gonna tell you what shift knob I got because the threads aren't right, so make sure you find the right one if you want to switch yours out. All right, there's it with the shift knob on. Pretty decent. I noticed there's an odd off center. Might be from one of the bars I used being a little bit bent or something, but if you got a problem with that, you can take this shift shaft off and bend it whichever one you want. Got any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos on this car, doing repairs and getting it running right, as well as modifications. So if you want to see more of that, or if you want to help our channel out, please consider subscribing. Helps a lot and helps us continue to do projects like this. Thank you.